Hi guys, my name is Anis, and today I'll be showing you how to embed native controls and web controls to build, mobile applications. I'd just like to know, are there any iOS or Android developers, native developers in the audience? Few? Okay, cool. So to start, I'd like to bring up this debate. So this debate started a few years ago, and it's been going ever since. Some people believe that HTML5 is a valid platform to build apps on, and some other people believe that it's not. So it started, I think, a few years ago when Facebook built their first mobile application in HTML5. They got really bad reviews. People complained, and the HTML5 community, and in this case, Ken Sencha came out with a blog post. And putting the app side by side, the HTML5 app and the native app, and they showed that the HTML5 app could perform just as well as the native app. But this debate is still going. I still see articles where people think that native is the only way to go, and HTML5 is just not mature enough. So today, if you wanted to build an app to target mobile devices, you basically have 4 options. You can either build a web application with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and it can run on any browser, any device, anywhere. Or you can go the native route. What I mean by native is you package your app with anything. Like it could be HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, or it could be native code that targets the platform SDK. So those are 2 options, and the third option would be the hybrid approach, where you can use a little bit of both. So you can have an HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but you can also have a little bit of native code in there, and that's what I'll be talking about today. And actually, a lot of apps today that you use every day, you probably don't notice, are using this approach, including the Apple App Store. So when you first download PhoneGap or Cordova, all you get is a full-screen WebView, Chromeless WebView. So that WebView allows you, obviously, to build your UI with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But the WebView also has this plugin architecture. So a plugin is basically something that you add to your application that has a JavaScript interface as well as a native interface. That talks to the platform SDK, and there's communication happening back and forth between the WebView and the platform SDK. So right now there are, I think, 22 or 23 official Cordova /PhoneGap plugins, but there's 954 when I did the slides, community plugins, and they do pretty much. They do everything. There's plugins for NFC acceleration. But there's also visual ones. So one plugin like Google Maps, or a plugin like Toast, for example, to display messages on Android. So they can be either sensor based or very rich visually. So maybe I can take a minute and show you the Google Maps. I don't know if you can see this. Maybe. So you can embed maps, native maps into your app. So either full screen or tiny ones, like here, and add markers, circles, or whatever. And you don't have to write any native code for this because it's got a JavaScript interface. If you want to find out about them, most of you guys probably know, but you could go to the Cordova Plugin Registry or this community site here called PlugReg. I just pointed to a couple, 2 or 3 here that are pretty popular. So this is how you use plugins. Pretty simple. You just create the app, add the platform, and then install the plugin, either with the PhoneGap or Cordova CLI. So those plugins are great, but sometimes you need to do your own thing. They don't do exactly what you want. You want a custom behavior that is not supported by the plugins. So in that case, you want to write your own plugin, and this is where your JavaScript skills won't be enough. You're gonna have to learn how to deal with the platform SDK that you're targeting. So Let's talk a bit about that because it's important for what follows. So when you write a plugin, like I said earlier, you have a JavaScript interface as well as a native interface. So the JavaScript interface can be shared across platforms. And Cordova on all platforms has this method called exec that takes 5 parameters that allows you to talk between JavaScript and native. So the 5 parameters are success and failure callback. So those get called when either the plugin executes successfully or not. Then the plugin class name, which is basically the native class name, and then the method on that plugin. And last is the arguments. So if the method needs arguments to execute, you need to pass that as the last argument, but it's not a requirement. So that's for the JavaScript, and it applies to all platforms. So now I'm going to talk about iOS first. So on iOS, once you have this JavaScript interface, you need to implement the native interface. So the native interface is basically an interface that you have to implement. So it's called CDV plugin. So you just define your plugin. And in this case, it's just an echo plugin that doesn't do much. Just echoes a message. So you implement an interface that extends from the CDV plugin. And then you can have multiple methods, but in this case, it's just one method called echo. And it takes a command as an argument. So that command will have the following. It will have the class name. So that's the plugin that was passed by JavaScript. The method name that was also passed by JavaScript, and the arguments that were also passed by JavaScript. The callback ID is what you use to talk, back to the WebView. So once you're done processing once you're done processing, you just send back the result to JavaScript using this callback ID. And I'll show you in a bit how that works. So yeah, so to once you have your plugin do what it needs to do, you create a plugin result like this by calling the result with status method on the CDV plugin result class. And it takes 2 arguments. It takes the status code as well as the message, and the message could be a string or a dictionary, which is basically a JSON object. So once you have the result ready, you need to send it back to the WebView. And the way you do that is by calling the send plugin result method on the command delegates object that is provided to you by the CDB plugin interface. And that method takes 2 arguments. It takes the plugin result and the callback ID that I talked about, because it needs to identify which call generated this result. So that's for iOS. Let's take a look at Android. So Android is pretty similar, a little bit different. So on Android, you need to know Java, obviously, and in this case, you need to implement a class that extends Cordova plugin. So this is the same plugin. It's an echo plugin, and you need to implement this method called execute, which returns a Boolean and takes 3 arguments. The first one is the action, which is basically the method name. The second one is the arguments. So same thing, like the arguments that are passed by JavaScript to native. The last one is called callback context, and it's basically the callback ID on iOS. It's a way to talk back to the WebView. So on Android, it's a little bit different than iOS, because usually what you end up doing is having the action here, and then you have like a switch case instead of like having multiple methods like you would have on iOS. So you would have like an execute method, and then switch case, and then multiple methods that map to the execute, basically. So yeah, the way you talk back to the WebView from native is by creating a plugin results like this. You instantiate it using the plugin result class, and you pass it the status code and the message, which could be again a string or JSON object. So once you have the plugin result ready, send it back to the WebView by using the callback context, and then you send the plugin result that way. Okay, so the reason why I talked about plugins is because I wanted to get to this, which is how you would embed a Cordova WebView within maybe an existing native app, or how to build an app that has a WebView and native controls at the same time. So in here, as you can see, I have native controls here. I have native controls here. I could have native controls on the side, or even like a separate view that's fully native. Oops, got excited. Sorry. Um, yeah. So here, the reason why I talked about plugins is because we need to be able to communicate between the WebView and the native controls, and the way we do that is with the Cordova plugin. So you might ask yourself, like, why would you use a Cordova WebView as opposed to a regular WebView? Because every platform has, its own WebView, and that's what PhoneGap and Cordova use that's what they use. But the reason why you want to use a Cordova WebView is because you have a plugin architecture in place, and you have a lot of plugins that already work with the Cordova WebView, and you can communicate back and forth pretty much for free. You don't have to implement anything. You could do it, but it's a little bit of work. It's not complicated, but it's a little bit of work, and it's work that you have to maintain on top of like whatever things you have to do for your app. Yeah, so the way you build a truly hybrid app that uses native controls and a WebView is not by using the PhoneGap or Cordova CLI, because those assume that every platform is sort of a build artifact. So every time you build, it basically destroys everything you changed in your native code. So the way to do it is actually to pull down the source, clone the source from GitHub. So in this case, it's iOS. So you clone the iOS source repository. Then you create a project using the bin create script that comes with the iOS distribution. So then you just cd into the app and then change. So create your native code, controls, views, everything like within Xcode or whatever editor you want to use. Xcode is pretty handy. And then you develop the native plugin that's going to be talking to the native code and the WebView and the JavaScript interface between the two as well, and obviously the app logic. So you do all of that within that folder, and then you just run it using the Cordova run / Cordova run script. So that's like basically the steps that you have to follow. Obviously, there's a lot more to it. So once you create a first like Cordova iOS project that is not like a Cordova CLI project, just an iOS project, this is what you get. You get this is an Xcode, obviously. So you get main view controller header, main view controller source file. This is the view file, and you get an app delegate. Every iOS app has an app delegate. So the main view controller is the view controller for the WebView. So anything that you need to do through the WebView, you have to do it in the main view controller here. So if you wanted to add like some basic controls to the WebView, like floating controls or whatever, you can just edit the main view controller view file here, and just drag and drop elements onto it. And then if you want to add, logic that basically listeners for whatever controls you add, you can just add that to the main view controller source file here. But in a lot of cases, you want your WebView to basically talk to other native views. And in that case, the view file here is pretty limited, so you might want to add like a storyboard and relationship between each view, and then associate basically each view to a view controller. And all you need to know is that the WebView's view controller is this one. So yeah, I don't know if any of you guys will be at the workshop tomorrow, but I'll be showing how this all works. Android is the same thing. The only thing I changed here is basically the repository is not the same, obviously. So you just clone down the repository. Then yeah, you just go to the app, write all the native controls, views and everything, write the plugin, JavaScript in the app, and then run it. So for Android, it's not as straightforward or simple on how to embed a WebView within an existing app. The official So yeah, so once you create a native project, native Android project, so here I'm using Android Studio, all you get is a main activity. And the main activity extends a class that's defined by Cordova called Cordova activity. So a main activity extends Cordova activity. And in there, all you get is basically 2 lines of code that load basically the URL. And that's pretty much it. So yeah, so if you follow the documentation, they tell you that if you wanted to embed a Cordova WebView on Android, you have to create a class that extends activity and implement an interface called Cordova interface. And that interface has 4 methods. But I think this is pretty complicated, and you shouldn't have to worry about, how Cordova works. And yeah, so I wouldn't follow this. But the cool thing about Android is that you can hijack the UI pretty much anywhere. Like, you don't even have to, write an activity at all. You can just write a plugin and get access to the view, and then just change it on the fly. So I'll be showing you guys in a bit how to do that. But in my case, I just create an activity that extends Cordova activity, and then I just hijack the UI there. But you can also do that in a plugin. And the cool thing about that is that you can technically, whoops, what happened? Oh, I guess I can't see that screen. Whatever. So yeah, you can write a plugin and hijack the UI in there, which means you can use the CLI technically and not use just a Cordova Android project. So yeah, I'll be showing you guys how to do that. Can anybody see this back there? Bigger than this? How do I do that? Command plus. Not working. Sorry. Sorry. So yeah, so when you create a Cordova Android project, all you get is this, which is basically like an activity that extends Cordova activity. And then you get these 2 lines added. So here I'm going to show you how to basically change that UI by adding these 3 lines. So here I'm just getting native controls that are defined here, which are basically 3 buttons, 1, 2, and 3. So I just inflate those from the main.xml file that I defined in my layout here. And then I just get the root view, like the app view. The app view is actually the Cordova web view. I get the root view from that by calling this method get view and then get parents. So that gives me the root, and I just add the layout that I just added in XML to that view. So if I run this, can't see anything here. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, it might take a while. But anyway, you would see. Yeah. Yeah, so anyway, you would see the web view and basically the native controls on top of it. And then to get them to interact, you would have to basically write a plugin to every time you click on a button, it would trigger an event that would talk to the web view. Oh, here it is. Yeah, pretty simple. There's not. Can I just say 3 more words? Okay, cool. Okay, 3.5. Okay, so basically what I want to show you today is that, well, first of all, let me just go back a little bit. But yesterday, so these are resources that you can follow. if you want to do this. There's not a lot of resources out there, so these are, yeah, the blog by Holly is actually pretty good, so if you want to do that on iOS, you should follow that. Yeah, so yesterday I saw this tweet. Faucets are confusing. And I'm guessing Simon basically tweeted that because he saw one of these and he didn't know how they worked. But I'm sure Simon's never seen this one. So what I mean, like the reason why I'm bringing this up is because it doesn't matter what you use. What matters is how you do it. So even if you use the best tools, you're still going to do a shitty job. You can still do a shitty job. So that's it. Yeah, thank you.